Hello, my name is Caitlin Whalen, and this is my interpersonal communication project for Human Services Counseling 508 Studies in Interpersonal Communication at Liberty University. In the beginning of this class, I thought that I already knew how to communicate and that this class would be kind of a breeze, but I quickly learned that talking and actually communicating are completely two different things. Next slide. What is interpersonal communication? John Stewart describes communication as the continuous, complex, collaborative process of verbal and nonverbal meaning making. But interpersonal communication is a subset of the general communication process, a particular kind or type of communication. And then John Stewart defines interpersonal communication again as the type or kind of communication that happens when people that are involved talking and listen in a way that maximize the presence of the personal. Next slide. And also, I would like to say that this whole entire communication project will be based on the overarching goal, which is mine, my behavioral blend and background, communication barriers and resources and strategies, and my action plan, also while engaging and enlarging the conversation. My overarching goal was easy for me to define itself. I thought that I would start off with a great Bible verse from Philippians 3:6, which is, I press on toward the goal for the prize of the upward call of God in Christ Jesus. And my overarching goal is to show the love of Christ with others through communication that is honest and encouraging while being a respectful, contributing listener. This is so important to me because sometimes I feel a little bit like I'm not involved while listening to others. I like to get my point across, and sometimes I don't listen to what others have to say. Next slide. Enlarging the conversation. What is enlarging the conversation? Enlarging the conversation can be measured as developing and maintaining an open and honest line of communication from one person to another while using resources and methods for both the speaker and the listener. Stewart explains that conversation is the relationship, which is totally true. If the conversation stops, so will the relationship. For example, if you're at a dinner party and you find someone interesting and you start a conversation with them and then suddenly it stops, the relationship can no longer blossom or bloom. Next slide. My background. I am a 23-year-old female, almost 24. My parents divorced when I was 5 years old. I was born in Arkansas. I lived in Arizona, and then I moved to Alaska. I am a military spouse, and I'm almost married for 4 years. And I have my bachelor's in criminal justice, juvenile justice, and I am currently trying to receive my master's in human services counseling. Now, all of this is tied to communication in a way. Like I said, I'm 23 years old, which means that I live in a world of where communication is constantly done on a cell phone or social media, and it's very hard for someone to look up from that. My parents divorced when I was 5 years old, and my brother at the time, he's 7 years older than me, and he suffers with a form of a mental disability where it's hard for him to communicate the way that he wants to be heard. And so therefore, I had to communicate for him on certain issues that fell into our hands. I was born in Arkansas, born and raised. I lived in Arizona. I moved away from my family when I was just over the age of 20. That was back in 2015. I had to learn how to adjust to things by myself quickly. And then I moved to Alaska a year later, and I no longer can call my mom to have her make me a doctor's appointment. I have to use my own communication skills to do that. I'm a military spouse, so that already gives me a little bit insight on the communication barriers that I have because things are difficult for us. We have to face challenges that most people don't have to face. Behavioral blend. The behavioral blend is simply easy to understand once you get it, of course. From the Uniquely You quiz that we had to take, they're based off of these 4 different items: DISC, which is DISC. D is active task oriented, I is active people oriented, S is passive people oriented, and C is passive task oriented. What is expected of me is S and C, and who I am is S and C as well. So you're probably wondering what DISC means if you don't already know. D is dominating, directing, and determined. I is inspiring, influencing, and interactive. And S is steady, stable, shy, security-oriented. C is cautious, competent, and compliant. Like I stated before, I am S and C for both, which is surprising. So I am steady, stable, shy, security-oriented, and cautious, competent, and compliant. Now, I will say that I wasn't exactly not surprised, but at the same time I was. I knew that I was shy and security-oriented. I follow the rules. I'm a rule follower, and I get made fun of for that, but it's just how I am. My behavioral blend breakdown is, like I said, as you can see, when it comes to what is expected and what I truly am, I am the same. Graph 1, this is what is expected of me, and I found it interesting that my S is quite higher than what this is me on graph 2 is, because it's the same, so I figured both graphs would be very similar. What is expected of me is it's very different, and then what is also interesting about this is me is that you can see that my graph slowly rises, where my C is very, very confident in itself. Next slide. My breakdown is continued. I am both submissive and competent. I am passive. I'm shy, but I'm not antisocial. I'll strike a conversation once I get to know you, but I won't go out of my way to talk to you, if that makes sense. I don't seek the center of attention. I hate it. It's not my favorite thing in the world. I do one thing at a time, and I like to do it right. I like to follow the rules when it comes to it, and if it's not right the first time, I kind of get a little bit impatient. I'm nervous up front in the spotlight, such as this. This is not normal for me to be recording a video and putting it on YouTube. I've done it before in the past, and it's quite anxiety-filled when I have to look at, oh, this has this many views, and oh, this has a comment. It's scary for me. I just want to be humble, quiet, and compliant. And Carbonell goes on to explain that when both graphs are the same, you are consistent in public and private. You are comfortable with your overall behavior, and people find it easy to read and understand you. And I agree with that. Next slide. My communication barrier number 1 is internal noise pollution. Examples would be hearing what you want to hear, biased listening, and physical obstacles. Solutions for internal noise pollution: focus on one topic at a time, maintain eye and listening level contact, and understand that others have different opinions. And at this time and age, I feel like this is definitely a big barrier in communication because of the final sentence right there, understand that others have different opinions. Everyone wants to think that their opinion is right, and they will try and make you believe that. But because of biased listening, we have to understand that we all think different. And just because someone doesn't think like you doesn't mean that they're right or they are wrong. Next slide. My communication barrier number 2 is external noise pollution. And this would be interruptions, which is major. Examples would be while trying to have a conversation at a meeting, a coworker keeps answering their cell phone, they talk over you, or they get sidetracked easily. The solution to fix this is just to communicate with your coworker. Tell them or ask them, hey, is it okay if we come back at a different time? You might be busy, or we could just email about this situation if that's appropriate. Next slide. Resources and strategies. The just listening approach is a conscious, intentional listening without ego, and it understands listening to be a creative act. Allowing space. Make space in your mind for insight and surprises to emerge from talkers' reflections and comments. and control your emotional blind spot. And this is super important. I found these resources and strategies from a peer article on the Liberty University Library website. It's okay to walk away when a situation becomes irradical or unbearable at times. That's where the allow space comes in. Make space for your mind that you need to walk away. It's okay. Next slide is continued. Keep an open mind. People think differently. And be patient. We understand that there are ramblers like myself who sometimes there's 15 stories within one conversation, but just be patient. Practice active listening and remove distractions such as a cell phone, your pager, which is not a normal thing anymore, and windows. And I especially said windows because for myself, I constantly find myself looking out a window. I'll see something in the corner of my eye and it's instantly like my head turns and there I am thinking, what is that? Where did that come from? And be respectful and want to listen. This is a major one because whenever you're respectful to others, they will in turn be respectful to you. Next slide. My action plan is to go back and think about when I feel upset and frustrated while trying to communicate and listen. How can things improve? The action plan is based off of my overarching goal, by the way. And practice the techniques that were in the previous 2 slides. I feel like those techniques are major and they can contribute to communication. And continuously self-reflect on ways to better my communication skills and use those techniques. If you're continuously, which are both the same, reflecting on how to fix your communication skills, you will become a better communicator. Next slide. In conclusion, this is from John Stewart. There's a direct link between the quality of your communication and the quality of your life. If you communicate and you're happy, your life will be happy. Throughout this slideshow, I went over my overarching goal, my enlarging the conversation, communication barriers, resources and strategies, and an action plan on how to all tie this up together to communicate better. Next slide. This slide is my bibliography, and you will find it in bottom below me on different resources that you can also look at throughout this slideshow or on your own. Thank you for listening and watching, and I hope to hear from you. Thanks.